time again, which means it can't have been a mistake. It must have been meant to be true. So, we will support continued competitions between schools. I simply want to know, and if the Mayor had been here tonight, I would have asked him, I need you to tell us what you mean by that. How will you continue support competitions between schools? Before we started our work in 2005, the School Sports Partnership, there were 2 sports competitions held in the borough. 2. There are now 75. So we need to know the answer to a number of supplementary questions like, how many sports competitions? I mean, not 75, of course, but not 2. Let's hope. So how many? And how will you organise them? Because, again, people might say, oh, well, schools will do it themselves. Anybody who knows anything at all about what goes on in schools these days will know nobody in schools has got time to be organising competitions across the borough. Nobody. Head teachers haven't got time. Deputy heads haven't got time. Heads of PE in secondary school haven't got time to do that. They're working flat out to stay on top of the latest changes to the national curriculum. They're watching over their shoulder to see Ofsted turning the corner of the street to come and inspect them for the 25th time that month. There's no way on earth that schools are going to be able to do this. If it can't be done by somebody in the council or on behalf of the council, it isn't going to happen. But then, here's the really crucial bit. We will continue to support the youth games. They've never supported the youth games. Now, remember what I said at the beginning, this is 2 administrations so far we've worked under, and neither administration has supported us. We were given an absolute cast iron assurance, when I say we, Chris Willits and I. Chris Willits, by the way, I'm sure everybody in the room knows him, is our manager, the man who walks on water in his spare time. Not that he has any. We had the original meeting with the then Chief Executive of the borough, Kevin Collins, and he had a discussion with the man who then went on to succeed him as interim Chief Executive, Steve Halsey, who was then Director of Communities, Localities and Culture. They had previously been in charge of the youth games, and Kevin Collins told him, they're now taking over control of youth sport in the borough, the foundation, and you will need to passport that money for the youth games from us to them. Never came. Not once, not any single year. It's somewhere in the region of £200,000 plus we've racked up over the years as a bill for that. So we will continue to support, I'm afraid is not true. Or rather, if they did start to support it, that would be the first time that's ever happened since we were invented. We will continue to support the core package of support for key sports. We don't know what it means. If the Mayor had been here tonight, I would simply have said to him, you know, if an officer has told you this, you need to go back and ask them what you mean by that. Which key sports do you believe you are currently supporting? Because if you are, it's news to us. And we would love to know about it, because we think, if you think that there's money has gone from the council, you know, to support key sports like football, rugby, cricket, basketball, volleyball, whatever, we need to know about it, because it's never arrived at us. And we will continue to support a number of the clubs that provide sports facilities across Hamlets. What clubs? Again, you know, somebody may have told the Mayor, oh, we do support him. Maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're talking about a particular club, you know, being held at a particular swimming baths or whatever. But they don't support those big major clubs that are doing the bulk of the work for us across the borough. You know, the huge squads that we've got in, as I say, in 12 different sports, squads and academies that regularly bring in, you know, dozens and dozens of young people to play competitions between schools, between other boroughs, who go on tour, you know, around the country. Some of them are off tonight. Jahid, where are you off to tonight, Jahid? Off to Bromsgrove tonight with cricketers, you know. They were there a week ago, something, you know, it's Chris, you know, a month ago was in Barcelona with some of the staff and some of our students playing football. You know, none of those clubs are getting any support at all from the council at the moment. So we will need to know, we will need to continue, and I'm going to ask every single councillor to be asking specific information about what that means, the support for key clubs and sports across the borough. But look, here's the really important thing. Chris, have you got a copy of the strategy there? I've completely forgot. Oh no, I have got it. Sorry, I've got it. I thought I hadn't brought it with me, but I have. This is in the pack as well. You can imagine we can't give these out to too many people. It costs hundreds of pounds. The borough hasn't got a sports strategy. It's never had one. It hasn't got one now. But here's a youth sports strategy. Created by the foundation, led by Chris Willett. We've got the strategy. We've given a copy of that to every single councillor. We said, you know, you're talking about us not having a business plan. A, we have had a business plan. Here it is. Remember? And if we're talking about people who don't have the proper documentation to hand, you haven't even got a strategy for sport, and we have. And we've never called it anything else. We're not White Van Man. We proudly call ourselves the Tower Hamlets Youth Sports Foundation. Look, there's the borough, there's the council logo. It's been there from day one of our inception. We're proud of Tower Hamlets. You know, everything we do says Tower Hamlets on it. It's not the Chris Willits Foundation or Chris Dunn Foundation, the Langdon Park Foundation. It's the Tower Hamlets Foundation. And this should be the Tower Hamlets Youth Sports Strategy. It's not at the moment. We've created it, but nobody's adopted it. And we would need to know very seriously from councillors, are you happy about that situation? Are you happy that you're really in a position and your office is in a position to take over and do this work as you have promised here, when you haven't even got a strategy against which you can judge what you're going to be doing once these people are gone? And the last thing I wanted to draw your attention to is a report. I've referred to it a number of times in the council chamber and elsewhere, and it's the benchmarking report. We just got a sight of this some time ago, and we've referred to it a number of times since. And talking to councillors, it's pretty obvious that, Chris, I am going to need your help in a second, just to save me from faffing around here. Just find, this will find my benchmarking report. Look, the council itself commissioned people who knew what they were talking about and said, we want you to go and look at every other London borough and come back and tell us, how are we doing in terms of the spending on sport? Are we spending a comparable sum of money to other inner London boroughs? If not, we need to know. If we are, great, but if not, we need to know. You know, just root around, Chris, don't worry, it's there somewhere. They came back and said quite clearly, as far as the general picture is concerned, you're spending almost the same sum of money on, thanks Chris, on schools, on sport across the borough as everybody else. But, and it was a big but, you are spending hugely less on young people's sport than other London boroughs because you've got this thing called the Tower Hamlets Youth Sports Foundation. And they're charged by your council to do the work in the borough. So, yes, you're spending a similar amount of money on sport as most other inner London boroughs, but most of it, the bulk of it, the vast majority of it, is being spent on adults because you have said to the Youth Sports Foundation, you do all the work on youth sport. Now, that's fine, and that was our understanding at the time. But the important message now for the mayor and every councillor is, if the Sports Foundation now goes, if you make the staff redundant and you close it down, you can't carry on with a situation where the £3.8 million is being spent, virtually all of it on adults and very little of it on young people. You are going to have to now seriously sit down and rethink the way you allocate that money. And we are simply saying to the mayor and to the councillors, why not do that now? You're going to have to do it once we've gone. Why not do it now and solve the problem? Because we've said all along, We want schools to continue to pay into our organisation. We think that's important. Don't believe the people who say to you, oh, you know, they want the council to pay for the whole services. Nonsense. We've never said that. We believe that it's important that organisations pay for a service. Apart from anything else, it makes them commit to it when they pay some of their money towards it. So we want schools to pay. We just don't want them to have to pay quite as much because they can't afford it any longer. And anyway, they're paying for things that they shouldn't be paying for. They're paying for things that, like the London Youth Games, that you should be paying for. So we want you to put in some money which would make that problem go away. And you're going to have to pay for it anyway once we've gone. And to this day, I haven't had one single person who's been able to tell me what's wrong with that argument. Not one person has been able to say to me, no, you've got it wrong, that won't work for the following reasons. Instead, what people tell us is, oh, you want the council to pay for all of your services. Oh, you're not prepared to write a proper business plan. I'm sorry to have spoken at such length tonight, but you can imagine that after what happened at the council meeting, and again, and I've said this in the email I sent out to all councillors today, that wasn't the mayor's fault. That wasn't anybody's individual fault what happened, but I have asked all councillors, please have a look at the standing orders in the council regarding petition debates, because frankly, you know, they need rewriting after what happened there. You know, I mean, every councillor who stood up wanted to ask a question and were told that they weren't allowed to ask me questions. If they had been, we could probably have resolved most of these issues there and then that night. We're only having this meeting because effectively our voice was not heard. And I'll just remind you that, you know, 6,000 plus people and counting, you know, have signed a petition in 2 weeks to support our services, which must mean something about the quality of our work. So let me finish. You all have seen the petition, the online petition. You have seen some of the comments on there, and I sent to councillors a summary of particularly the things said by parents and young people about it. You know, a wonderful piece by that young Muslim female PE teacher who said, you know, she was only a PE teacher now because of the work that the foundation had done with her, and what a great role model she felt she was now for so many girls in the community. What a brilliant example. Well, lots of others, weren't there? People working as therapists in the NHS, all because of the work we'd done with them as young people when they were developing and growing. But this is my favourite one of all time. It's from Laura in Poplar. It's on the website, you can see it. And this is what she said. The support they give to young people is outstanding. It's a fantastic service for pupils of all ages, and they're one of the prides of the borough. To give disadvantaged children the opportunity to train and be coached by these incredibly talented coaches is something that I personally feel is one of the best things about the borough. And of course, as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, right on, Laura, you know, I totally agree with you. And then this is how she finished. And I am glad my council tax supports this amazing cause. Now, great, what a great tribute Laura has made. Shame that she didn't totally understand that the council tax doesn't support this. No money from the council has ever, does ever now support this cause. But she's dead right. It should, because it is one of the prides of the borough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris Dunn, on setting out the case to support your petition. So, for those of you that have turned up just after our introduction, just a reminder, this is the subject is a petition to the council to save the programme of youth sport in Tower Hamlets by sharing the costs with schools. So this is what we want to focus on. And as Chris set out the case supported by the petition, I hope I've got my notes right here, but the four main points that Chris has responded to was, number one, schools not buying the service from Tower Hamlets Youth Sports anymore. So Chris laid out his points on that. Number two, which I got, was the mayor claiming funding deficits and having to supplement for the foundation. Chris laid out his points on that. Number 3 being not an adequate business plan is the way I've summed it up. Hope that's acceptable. Or actually, frankly, no business plan is what the council said. So Chris has laid out his points on that. Number 4, and the final one being the mayor's proposals and the items that the mayor claims, has said that he would propose once these changes are implemented. So Chris has actually asked questions on that. So those were the 4 points that I've got. And obviously, Chris has also added to this, which probably the council are yet to acknowledge, which is questions on the their initial business plan and why they declined to do a second business plan, and also the fact that the Youth Foundation have actually got a strategy which doesn't seem to be given the appreciation it should do. So these are all the grounds, and these are all the things that Chris has laid out. So at this point now, I will open the floor up to questions. So I'd like, hopefully, we'll get this mic over to you. So if I can ask you to raise your hand when you're ready to ask a question, just to, thank you, Chris. So just to clarify on how we'd like the questions to be done. So your questions should be on this specific subject, please. And please don't take offense if your question is not along these lines. I will have to terminate that question and move on to the next. So please, along these lines, I will allocate 3 minutes for you to make your point and ask your question, or if you'd quite simply like to make your point, 3 minutes to that, okay? And just on the points that I've got here, this main thing, your questions are along that subject. Your question should also seek clarification from Chris Dunn, okay, and not the mayor as it says down there. So your question is just to seek clarification from Chris Dunn here. And number 2 is make a specific point about funding youth sport in Tower Hamlets, okay? So that's the way we're going to keep this. So if I can ask also, once somebody does make a point, and maybe it's a very, very valid and a very appreciated point, a round of applause is very polite, and yes, I'd appreciate that. But if we can keep the jeering and sort of any shouting to a minimum, I know it's a... I appreciate Chris will want you to cheer it as much as possible, but obviously we want, I'm sure you guys want to make a professional point across, and passions are high, so I'll appreciate that to a degree. Okay, so if I can get a show of hands, and hopefully, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'll take second set of questions. So that's the first 7. Hope you've remembered that order. So if we can go across to the first person that raised their hand, which I believe is it. So if I can ask you to first introduce yourself. If there's a specific area or a school that you represent, please mention that. If you do have a conflict of interest, please declare that as well, and then your 3 minutes will begin. Thank you.
No, we
even as an interim measure. And then one of the other issues that came up at the council meeting was around the council's night levy that they were going to implement. There was a legal challenge to that, which means that's now been delayed, partly because the council didn't fully assess what the impact of it would be on things like small businesses and them being able to cope. So I wondered if, as a point of very much last resort, if the foundation had considered taking similar legal action against the council.
Okay. So just for the purposes of the mic, Elaine's questions. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. If we can get the mic, if we can get the second person that I pointed out at number 2. Sorry, my memory does very badly after 7. Okay. Yes. So if you can just once again introduce yourself.
Yeah. Parumia. I live in Myland. Also a member of Tower Hamlets Labour. Listening to you, Chris, and I have sort of like spoke to the mayor about it, there seems to be a breakdown in trust or etc. There seems to be a lack of, from what you're saying, there's a lack of political will to actually solve this issue. What is the cause of that from your interaction with the mayor? What is holding him back or the administration back from actually sorting this out, which should have been a win-win situation for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Chris, do you want one more question with that, or do you want to answer them too? Okay, if we can get person number 3 to ask their question, please. Okay, thank you. If you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Councillor Ohida Ahmed, I'm councillor for Lansbury Ward, where the Sports Foundation is. I've been working with Chris Dunn and Chris Willett for the last probably 15, 16 years. Just 1 or 2 points. I don't want to make any political points here. I think you are right that this is not a political battleground. We just need to find a solution. And I think there was going to be a solution if John Biggs were to listen to you or our motion. I submitted a motion at the full council from our independent group, and obviously we're not allowed to debate the motion properly, but if he was to listen, then probably we could find a solution. Did you ever ask him a question that there are £400 million reserves we left when we left the administration? We built this reserve purposely because we knew there was an attack coming in. And we knew that a lot of organizations like yours are going to suffer. This is one of the reasons we built a reserve. And this is the time. I repeatedly said to him at the full council many times that organizations like yourself, organizations like NAFAS and many other organizations, youth organizations, they need to be supported. And I think he is sleeping somewhere. He's not listening to us. Did you ask this question that there are £400 million reserves in the port, and whether he will be able to use some of this reserve for you?
Thank you. Okay, you've got the question. Do you want it? Would you like to repeat them, or are you okay? Yep, okay.
Yeah, I think it's better to do it a number at a time. The first question was about the transfer of staff to the council, and the question was, has anybody really said why not? Yes, to be honest, they have. I mean, it's, as you can imagine, I mean, the whole issue of employment is hugely fraught. I mean, we've probably spent more time, frankly, as trustees, trying to tease out all the issues about, I won't bore you with it, I promise you, but it's called the TUPE process, where staff have to transfer over, and they come with all of their existing conditions of employment. It's effectively, they bring everything with them from one organisation to another. Now, bluntly, that's hardest to a new organisation. If trustees had felt the advice from lawyers was, yes, you could set up a satisfactory organisation, then the hardest process would have been actually transferring staff over to this totally new organisation. We believe that transferring them from Langdon Park School to the council would be relatively easy, and to be honest, I think that's the view of council officers too, and including in the council's legal department, because effectively they are already employees of the council. They wouldn't have been if Langdon Park School, for instance, had become an academy in the meantime, but it hasn't. Langdon Park School is a maintained school within the authority, So effectively, they're paid, as if they were members of the council. And of course, all of their work, Chris and all of his staff, they work across the whole council. They don't work, specifically for Langdon Park School at all. So legally, they work for the school, and legally, the governors of Langdon Park are their employers, but morally, they're employed by the council, and I've made that point, repeatedly. And indeed, I showed the mayor that council officers have even started writing in minutes of meetings we've had. They've talked about themselves, London Borough of Tower Hamlets, as being the employer. So, which I think is right. I don't think that was a slip of the pen. I think they kind of recognise that effectively they are. But the council's argument is straightforward. They say, look, we're facing budget cuts. We've been laying off staff, which they have. That's true. This is not a time when we could be countenancing the idea of taking staff in. What we say in response to that, one, they are effectively already borough employees. They're working across the borough. And secondly, for all the reasons I just outlined before, we don't believe there's a financial risk. You'll get that additional money from schools paying their reduced subscriptions. We've already got about £400,000 in from schools in this financial year. And you reallocate resources from your sports budget, and we believe that the problem has been solved. But I can't go any further than that. If the mayor was here, obviously he might be able to say what beyond that is a problem, but I can't. As far as legal action is concerned, no, absolutely not. I mean, really, you have to believe me when I say trustees, we've had, so many meetings with officers and the mayor, repeatedly and we've always tried to be, to conduct those in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration and, collegiality. There's been no question, no talk of legal action at all up to now. You asked me about, the political, well, I mean, that's, that would be a great question, wouldn't it, if John had been here tonight, to ask what essentially is the problem. But if I had to put my finger on it, I think it's what we've been talking about tonight. I think there have been so many huge misunderstandings about what we're asking for. I mean, one of the things I said recently to John in a meeting was, I've heard people saying, oh, apparently the trustees not only want us, the council, to take on the funding of this organisation, bring the people into the council, but the trustees want to carry on managing it. And we've said, absolutely not. I mean, reluctantly, the trustees had already concluded that if the staff needed to go into the council and merge, we would have to walk away from it. I mean, if they wanted us to stay involved in trying to raise charitable funds through our charity to supplement the budget, fine, we might be able to do that, but we wouldn't be expecting to manage the staff. I think there have been misunderstandings, and I'd like to think they are sort of genuine misunderstandings. I don't like to think that nobody's been going around sort of deliberately sowing, untruths or lies about us. I suspect people have not really concentrated enough on exactly what it is we've been saying to them about this. We believe there is a proper plan. I mean, otherwise, why would the mayor stand up and say in a meeting they've declined to produce a business plan? I mean, John Biggs, I believe he is an honourable man, like all politicians. Our politicians don't go into politics because they're evil people who want to do bad things. They genuinely, I mean that, seriously. I mean, at every level, nationally and locally, I think the vast majority of politicians want to do a good job for people, I mean, they have disagreements about how to do it, but I don't think they're trying to do it. But somebody must have said to him somewhere along the line, trustees won't produce a business plan. And he's believed it was true, which is terrible. Because, and if only we'd been able to have the right kind of meetings at the right kind of level to say, look, there's the business plan, it's just not the one you wanted, And here are the reasons, again, why we can't produce that one. And the reserves, Ohid, again, it's kind of like the legal question. I mean, we have got so much to do just kind of understanding our own resources and our own work and whatever. We've never really, the only thing we did know about the council, because it was like it's publicly available, we were able to look on the budget and see the budget, £3.8 million for sport. So we were able to say, well, there you go, it's a public document. You've got a budget, because when the council has said to us, oh, we're facing cuts, 58 million, and he's dead right. I mean, it's horrendous, the cuts Hamlets have had to face, horrendous. But we said, yes, but after the cuts have happened, you've got a budget of 3.8 million for sport, after the cuts. And we're simply saying to you, spend some of that on youth, which your own benchmarking report says, you should be doing in the first place. I found it, it was great. Chris found me, here's one, but of course he wasn't able to find the one I'd copied up beforehand. Given that as of 2012, responsibilities for delivery of youth-focused sport programmes has been distributed across the council and the newly formed Youth Sports Foundation, benchmarking data suggests that Tower Hamlets has relatively higher spend for the more limited sports functions it delivers, primarily the focus of adult sport and physical activity, when compared to other boroughs. And the report goes on like this, just page after page, saying exactly that. You're not spending very much money at all on young people because this organisation still exists. And I just think they wouldn't even need the reserves, so it is what I'm saying. That you don't even need to tap into the council's reserves. It's there in the sports budget already.
Okay, so if we can get the mic across to person number 4, which was there, and then number 5 is to follow here, I believe. Okay, thank you. If you can introduce yourself. Put it in the middle. Put it in the middle.
How about now? My name's Stuart Burnside. I'm a resident in Limehouse. I'm an independent board member of the London Youth Games, and I am the president of Wapping Hockey Club, and I'm not a member of a political party. I mean, we at the London Youth Games obviously understand this situation. We have our own funding gap. We actually lost our title sponsor, and we haven't replaced them yet. So I have sat in a lot of board meetings discussing projected P&L against reserves, and you have my heartfelt sympathy for how painful that is. What I was hoping to ask was just a few more points of clarification on what you said, because the only numbers I heard were the surplus numbers. So if you could share, Chris, what the 16-17 deficit was, what the 17-18 projection was, what your current reserves are as opposed to the council's, what the cost of in-school and out-of-school delivery is respectively, and if there's any relationship between that, because I'm just trying to understand why the council wants to cut one specific.
Just, Stuart, I'm trying to write those down.
Sorry.
No, after the 17-18 budget, and what was that?
So the projection,
Yeah.
and then you had the council saying that they wanted you to cut the out-of-school. So I was wondering about the respective cost of in-school and out-of-school, and whether there's a link there. And then I understand if you don't have every number I'm asking for, it's just what came to mind listening to you. And then the other thought was about 10 years ago, I met Tony Miller, who runs the Whitechapel Mission. And the advice he gave me was he actually never took public money because you couldn't rely on it not being cut, which seems apt in our current discussion. And just, I wondered how realistic it was based on some of the numbers that you can hopefully share, whether we can find other sources of funding. I know you've already got corporate sponsors and things, but whether there's anything else that can be done by us in the community to support what you're doing, because maybe if we put money on the table, that'll help other money come from the council and so on. Sorry, that's...
Thank you. If we can now get the mic across to question number 5, which is lady at the front there. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Afsana Begum. I'm also a member of the Tower Hamlets Labour Party. My question was about the comment that you made about there being no sports strategy at the council, and there never had been one. What's been your relationship with the council sports development team? And in your opinion, I mean, what's your opinion about the work that they have done and how effective they have been in delivering sports in the borough?
Thank you. And if we can come over to question number 6, lady at the front here.
Thank you. My name is Councillor Rabina Khan. I'm the group leader for People's Alliance for Tower Hamlets. We also submitted an emergency motion at the full council meeting. Actually, it was done in conjunction with, got some information from Chris to help us to develop that business plan. There are a couple of questions, though, Chris, that I think we could look at. And my concern here is that we still haven't got to a resolution for you, even though you've had the conversation with the mayor. One of those concerns is the equalities impact assessment. And in light of the Ofsted report, and particularly in light of the fact that we've had youth centres that have been cut as well, more than ever, we need activities for young people in this borough. We have a very growing young population, particularly in light of the fact that we've got a huge number of 0 to 15-year-olds as well. What I would like to know is 3 things. We don't have the sports strategy, which actually is supposed to account for the £3.8 million. So we don't actually know what that money is being spent on bit by bit. So I would raise this at the overview and scrutiny meeting, and I think your petition ought to go there as well for a scrutiny challenge on the Sports Foundation and what we can do in the future. And in terms of funding, and the Mayor talks about the alternative plan here, and you're rightly to say so, that we don't actually know what the plan is, and particularly if you are going to develop anything in terms of a plan, you're supposed to liaise and talk to the people of the borough in developing a plan, and particularly that would be people who deliver sports, young people, schools, parents, all of those. So I'd be interested if we can follow that up as how he's come to this conclusion about the alternative plan. And lastly, we were one of the host boroughs to the Olympics. There is a great deal of Section 106 money that will be generated from the Olympics Park through development, and I think we ought to be accessing that in terms of delivering sport in this borough.
Thank you very much for that. Okay.
I've been writing like mad here, but I'll forget things. So just call out if you think I've missed something on it. Sorry, when somebody just saying that they were here from the Labour Party, I just remembered the chair asked us all to declare our interest at the start. And I completely forgot to say that all my working life I've been a card-carrying member of the Labour Party. Sorry, and I still am. So, and I forgot to mention that, didn't I? Stuart, you asked about the deficits. The documentation which we've provided, it is the final balance that we've produced. So, but in elsewhere in the pack, we've actually shown them how we resolve that by putting together the money that's going in through Langdon Park School and the money that comes into our charities account. So we, at the end of the year, you've got the bulk of the money, all the money virtually from schools goes through the council, then into Langdon Park School, and then to us. But if, people like, corporate sponsors, when they pay for services for us, that tends to be paid in a cheque to our charities fund. And all that we've simply done is on each single financial year, we take the surplus or deficit in both those accounts, add them together. And when I've said there's a surplus, I mean when everything's all added together. We're in surplus. Yeah, well, sorry, I read this is ones I read out before, but you can have a look at it. Yeah, it's there. The deficit you asked for, what was the final deficit in the year that I was talking about? That hasn't yet been resolved, and I'm not trying to hide it, because remember I said to you, it's all the money goes through Langdon Park School, so the council and the school and us have to finally agree that, and that hasn't happened yet, which is not unusual. We're only still in July, and the books are not closed, until the end of March, so it's there.
I just meant what's the number you're asking for?
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, but that's not the point. The borough simply said to Langdon Park School, while this matter is being resolved, we will assume the deficit. So Langdon Park School will not have to pay that money. See, otherwise they would. Langdon Park School would have been liable for the deficit. So the council have simply said, we will assume that deficit from you. Do you understand?
I just meant what's the actual number that the foundation needs to continue.
But that's a separate matter. So first of all, there's the deficit, but that's not the issue going forward. The issue going forward is the one bit of where there's total agreement between us and the council is we need a credible business plan to go forward, from where we are now, all of us, including our customers, the schools, and we're simply saying, and this is the discussion we haven't had yet, because the borough won't engage at that level. They've said to us, you produce that business plan that I described before. You put a business plan together for just working in individual schools, get the income from them, and provide them with individual services. And when you've done that, we will then talk about whether we will provide you with a repayable loan. Amount not specified, yet to be decided. Terms and conditions not yet specified. And as far as finding additional resources of the kind that I've just been talking about from the 3.8 million, no, in fact, we've been told, well, we can't commission services from you. So there isn't a sum. I wish there was, but I mean, I'd like to help you by saying this is the sum of money. If you want me to pluck a figure out of the air, I can, but you mustn't think that will be the sum of money that's definitively would be the one that would solve the problem. It just depends on that relationship going forward with the council. Are they or aren't they going to see us as effectively, if you like, a self-financing business unit within the sports and development arm of the council, or do they still believe that we can set up an independent trust and employ the staff directly? Because they're two entirely different things. One is impossible, one we know we can't possibly do. And you asked me about the out-of-school costs. Was that related to that? You were thinking about what is the sort of sum of money?
Well, it's all essentially the same thing,
yeah.
Right? Because, and I get it's difficult to be precise,
yeah.
But all I mean is there's a problem, there's money needed,
yeah.
there's help needed, the council is a
yeah.
potential
Yeah.
How much money do you need? That's all
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
even if it's just a ballpark finger in the air.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've got a ballpark figure, haven't we, Chris? I mean, what was our latest projection?
Well, so the split, first of all, on what's kind of community work and schools work. In terms of the proportions of work, we're about, it fluctuates, but 30-35% of our work is outside of school. So that's on the expenditure and the time taken, etc. In terms of costs, so the really important number is our staffing costs. Now, our staffing costs are somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000. No, they have been as high as 650,000. And the really important thing is, getting the proportions of that right, but also getting that money up front, and also having it, because it's a fixed expenditure for us, having a fixed income for it. So you're looking at whatever our levels of staffing are, that's the amount of money that we need. And I think that's why it's difficult to be precise at this point, because obviously if there's a new structure, a new staffing structure where that amount of money is different, I think as long as the fixed income covers that piece of fixed expenditure, that's the most important thing.
That's probably enough, because you get, Chris, obviously, you know, we could vary the size of the organisation, and then that sum goes up or down. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All I was trying to understand is
Yeah.
the relationship
Yeah.
between your spend
No.
and what you currently have.
Yeah.
Technically can redesign.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're right about, I mean, obviously, he's right, the guy at Whitechapel. I mean, public money is very difficult. It's important to say, though, about that. I had another hat on until very recently. I was the chair of the London Head Teachers Alliance for PE and school sport, which I did after I retired. And we were a major group lobbying the government to firm up about the sport premium. Now, again, I've written to all the primary head teachers in the borough to tell them this. The good news is, remember George Osborne? Remember George Osborne? When he was Chancellor, he announced that the new sugar tax, all the money raised from that was going to pay for sport in primary schools, and it's been confirmed. It was in the Tory manifesto, and they announced it about 3 weeks ago in a government bulletin. So not only do primary schools know that they're going to continue to get that until 2020 now, guaranteed, but from this autumn, it's going to be doubled. The amount is being doubled. So there is, you know, some surety now about the money that's going to come into primary schools. Secondary schools get nothing, unfortunately, but primary schools will. I was asked about the relationship with sports development. I really can't say too much about that for two reasons. One, for the reason that, you know, that benchmarking report makes clear. The agreement 5 or 6 years ago, as it is now, with Kevin Collins and Steve Hawksey and the council was, and subsequent meetings we had with the director of CLC and director of Children's Services, was that we, as an organisation, would take over youth sport, and the sports development team effectively concentrate on adults. So, in a sense, our relationship has been, you know, pretty tenuous over that time. The second reason why I don't say too much is because obviously, you know, we would want, you know, we're asking for a much closer relationship with that sports development team, and you know, that's something I'm hoping against hope that we will be able to develop a much closer, productive working relationship with that team than we've got at the moment.
Can I add a point?
Yes, of course, Chris. Yeah.
There's a very traditional way of doing sports development from a local authority point of view, and it's what I was involved in before I moved to Tower Hamlets. And that is, you have a PE going on in schools, you have a bunch of sports clubs, and therefore you have a role in kind of facilitating some transition between the two. In Tower Hamlets, there's a few issues which make that that model not as effective as it might be. Some of it's to do with the infrastructure in some sports. So although there's some very good clubs in some sports, there's a lot of sports where there are no clubs at all. And I think there's also a lot of things about young people and some of the barriers that they have to making that transition into non-sport, which make a different model more appropriate. And I think probably, if you don't mind, we do have some of the boys who are on this cricket trip. It would be really interesting to see. Put your hand up if you're going on the cricket trip today. Just another quick show of hands. Do you think you would have become involved in cricket if you hadn't had a cricket coach or cricket officer coming into your school and introducing you to the game and telling you where the opportunities were put down to. If you think you would have made that transition if you hadn't put that coaching. So just an example, I think, you know, that's not been...
No. Very well done, Chris, yeah.
but you know, a really telling point. Of course, that's not the case with every single child, and it's not the case with every single sports club. No. But it's just a very telling thing, I think, about how having a presence in schools and having that continuum of school to community thing as one whole thing is very, very important.
Yeah. How many of you play at Blackheath Cricket Club now? You know, again, I've made this point repeatedly that the first of our young cricketers went over in the front seat of Chris's car. And the rest is history. You know, there's dozens and dozens more like them who regularly play there now. Dipan, first young Bangladeshi male to get a contract with the MCC, I think, when? Yeah. Oh, sorry, no, sorry. There's one more. Sorry. Just let me. Oh, yeah. Do. Yeah.
I'm an assistant head in a local primary school that actually subscribes to the Tower Hamlets Youth Sports Foundation, and if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had children going on to represent Tower Hamlets, their borough, in the London Youth Games, in a variety of sports that we, as a local primary school, would never have been able to access. Yeah. We don't know anything about a lot of the sports that these guys come in and coach our children. Children would go on to join athletics clubs, hockey clubs, badminton clubs, because of the London Youth Sports Foundation. Yeah. And we wouldn't be able to have that.
And beyond, three people so far in junior team GB, you know, potential Olympic athletes, you know. Again, it's just, there's no...
As a parent as well as, and also cricket mad in Australia. So when I looked around prior to going to swing boroughs for kids, we ended up going over to MCC to get the coaching. You know, so I got the Jubilee as a cricket mum all the way over, and came back finally through Chark and was the team coach at Swing Borough. Led on to Chark, and then I said to Chark after a year, "You're better than the MCC coaches." Without a doubt, the quality of coaching.
No, but these, it's important, isn't it? Look, I said to a number of people a few weeks ago, I don't believe you get 6,000 plus signatures in 2 weeks on a petition there if there aren't an awful lot of people out there who know the quality of these guys, you know, and what they've done. I mean, you just don't. I mean, anybody knows. It takes a huge amount of time normally to get 6,000 signatures on a petition, you know. Sorry, I didn't answer Rabina's. You raised about the scrutiny committee, and the mayor said he was happy, didn't he? He said at that council meeting he'd be happy to appear before that committee, and so I meant to find out more about it, so I'll talk to you later, because I don't know how it works, but we'll, you know, if that's a good committee for us to go and make representation, we'll go, and maybe it would be good for us to go, you know, with some young people, with some, you know, parents, you know, to people who actually can talk from the heart and from clear experience about it, you know, so I'll talk to you about that. The really important point you mentioned about the equalities impact assessment, and talked about, you know, the need for, in a borough which has such a huge and growing young population, and something else that comes up in this benchmarking report. Remember, this is not us. This was the council's own commissioned report, and they wrote back and said THYSF delivers a number of functions that may be considered to fall within a wider community scope, and then they listed them. Sports-specific programs across a range of sports we've talked about, health-focused programs contributing to social cohesion, and mobility sports programs. You know, and I think this is the point I would love to get onto in discussion with the council. Is it's not just about sport. I think people get an idea. You know, they hear the word sport, and they just see, you know, people running around a pitch or which is really important, as you know. And we talked about it tonight, but there's lots of other things that are equally important. We're just as proud of the work we've done in training young youth leaders and people who work out on the estates, you know. And they don't put up a flyer saying, we're going to run a sports club on your estate. You know, they get the key, they open up their, that little rusty iron gate onto the ballpark, and then they go around the flats, banging on doors and saying, you need to get your kids down here now. Do you know what I mean? And later on they might be dropping people home if they need to. They're mentoring them. They're often taking the place of brothers and sisters, in the relationship they develop with them. And yeah, social cohesion. I mean, you go to the youth games, our own youth games at Mile End Stadium or at Wood Wharf when it was there, and people who go in the first time just can't believe it. Big ones, little ones, boys, just as many girls, black, white, Asian, all mixing together. It's just fantastic. And why would, when every time you turn on the television and the radio or open a newspaper, you're hearing about, the need for more cohesion and the need to tackle radicalisation and all the other stuff. And now it's acid sprays, isn't it, and knife crime and whatever. Why would you not want to keep alive an organisation which brings people together in that way and binds them together like a big family? Madness, I think. Sorry.
Just that, Chris, the alternative plan, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean, the one, I know, 106 falls into the same as what I was saying to Owen. I mean, I'd love to talk about it. I just don't know enough about it, I freely admit, but I'll talk to anybody who can tell me where there are additional, reserves or resources that we can use. But the alternative plan, what was the
Who has he consulted with, if you've got the plan there?
Well, again, this is why, it would have been great to have had the mayor, because I had a whole series of those questions myself, Who is putting this plan together? It must be sports development. I mean, it must be. You don't expect a mayor to come up with a plan of this detail. I mean, it's got to be given over to the officers who should know what they're doing. But if this is the sports development team who haven't done anything working with youth for 5 years, by design, I mean, it's not, we've been doing that. How have they put together a plan without ever once talking to this man, for instance? How could you put together a credible plan and not talk to the guy who's been, masterminding the whole thing for 12, 13 years now? No.
Number 7 we have across here. I'll take number 8 over to that. Any more questions? 9 there and 10. So 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. Okay, we'll squeeze in 11. So those will be the final questions. I think we just need to be a bit conscious of time. So we'll go in that order. So once again, if you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Papu. Chris was my head teacher when I was at Langham Park. I was around when the foundation was, founded. I've also come through the foundation through the leadership program, got better training there, and also worked for them as a multi-sports coach. Currently working with young people and being a sports fanatic. That's what I got out of the service. One thing that's probably missing, and a lot of people, adults, wouldn't understand, is it's a service that doesn't just provide service for young people, but it maintains it and keeps it going in terms of a lot of young people, like I've gone into youth work, a lot of young people have gone into schools and found jobs working as sports teachers and even studying it at a later stage. And you have a lot of young coaches who are working for different foundations, across the country. I have a few questions, but after speaking to councillors, I don't need to know what the service does. I've been through it, and I know particularly well what the council actually provides in its youth services and sports services, and what the sports development team, I don't know what they do. But in terms of, it's great to see. What I don't understand is the finances. I did until great pack, very detailed. What I would want to know is, obviously, we've just heard that there's reserves left, and we've just got to figure what the sports budget is. So in terms of the council, has it ever contributed anything in terms of finances? Ever? And I'm not just talking about this administration, I'm talking about the previous administration as well.
Thank you. So if we can move across to the back row there. Gentleman with glasses there. Thank you.
You've pretty much answered my questions already. But it's to do. Sorry, yeah, my name's John from Mile End. I'm just sort of interested in this whole topic. I think the main issue is to do with the finances. I'm still struggling to get my head around them, really. So if you look on the Charity Commission website, 2 sets of accounts are in credit, 1 is a deficit. But that's for quite a few years ago, so there's not, when are the accounts for last year going to be published? And will they be a surplus or a deficit? So in other words, 2016/17, that's not on the Charity Commission website.
Do you mean the charity one or the...
Yeah, the charity. And I think that's the other thing, is it's sort of quite confusing, and I wonder if this is what half the problem with the mayor is you look on the charity website and it's 150, 160,000, those sorts of incomes and expenditures, and obviously that doesn't go anywhere to pay for the coaches. So it's almost like there's one set of finances and then there's another set which is actually the charity finances. And I don't think that looks great, personally.
Thank you. And if we can go over to the far right there.
I'm Keziah. I'm a parent of a service user, also a parent governor of a local primary school, and I work at a local college as well. So I've been following this quite passionately because obviously it's brought a lot of personal benefit, but also for the peers of the kids at the primary school that I'm a governor of. I guess because there's a lot of stakeholders, what I would like to see, so it's sort of a question, what I would like to see is some sort of communication channel that allows the council and the decision makers in the schools, which is probably like the secondary head teachers consultative and whoever represents the primary heads, and the Youth Sport Foundation to actually come together and hash through some of this, because as you said, there's possibly quite a lot of misconceptions. There may be information that's out of date, there may be things that aren't accurate, and I just don't see how this can be resolved unless quite swiftly some of those decision makers are all round a table, because obviously budgets, certainly at the school that I'm a governor at, has been set already, which means that there's already some stuff that we're on the back foot of for next year with decisions that we've made as a school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, look, let me go, just for once, let me go back in reverse order. You're absolutely right. I mean, that is one of the hardest things of all, is communicating with all those people. Very swiftly, in no particular order, from our inception, when the foundation was set up, it has to have, our constitution says, there must be 2 primary head teachers as trustees, and there must be a secondary head teacher as trustee. There are. But 2 head, I mean, none of the head teacher trustees are here tonight because it's school holidays and they're all out of the country, you know. But Pramjit Bhuta, who's the head of Stepney Green, represents the secondary heads. Kate Gooding from Virginia Primary School, Rachel Mann from, remind me, St Mary's and St Michael's is currently, I mean, it was Ian Jones from Marion Richardson before that. And interestingly, in our constitution too, the council is meant to appoint a senior officer to serve as a trustee. Initially, that was Isabel Catamol, who was Director of Children's Services, followed by Anne Canning, who was Director of Children's Services. When Anne Canning left, we didn't any longer have anybody at director level appointed to us, and I think that was a big mistake, frankly. But that's that. So the head teachers have got their trustees on the board. In addition to that, normally at least once a year, Chris and I go to the head teachers consultative meeting, which is all the primary and secondary and special heads all come together at the PDC, and I go down there and talk to them, and Chris answers any questions and so on. And because the secondary schools don't have any, you know, in primary schools, the head teacher very often is very hands-on about how they want the sport developed. Secondary schools, it tends to be the heads of PE. Heads of PE in town, it's a brilliant group. They meet regularly and plan everything collaboratively and collegially. Chris is always at their meetings, and I go to anywhere they're dealing with strategic issues. So we're very, very close together. And in the meantime, Chris spends a good bit of his life, you know, driving around talking to head teachers individually and in their schools about it. So you're right. Keeping those lines of communication open are hugely important, and we've always done that, and we're still trying, you know, really hard. I said to you just before that, you know, I'd written to all the primary heads because I wanted them to know for sure that the government has now committed themselves to doubling the sport premium until 2020. That's important information that all primary heads need to know, because that's money that they can only spend on sport, you know. So it's helpful information. The account situation, look, I might even get Chris just to add to this. It's very simple. The bulk of our money goes from schools to the council to Langdon Park School, who don't spend it themselves. They imagine we go, and Chris and I, you know, in the normal course of events, would be in Langdon Park at least once a month, and often more. We're meeting there with the chair of the finance committee, the head teacher, chair of governors, and we resolve, you know, the issues. So the bulk of the money is going through Langdon Park Schools accounts. But as a charity and a limited company, you know, we've got our own bank account, which you have to have, because when you get money given to you by Lloyds or whatever, they'll only give it to a charity, and they pay a check directly to our bank account. So there have to be those two accounts. But the surplus or deficit that I'm showing in the folder there is those two things added together, and the sum that comes out tells you whether we're in surplus or in deficit. Does that answer that question for you?
It sort of does, yeah. I mean, as I say, there are these two surpluses and a deficit, but there's no figures in the charity insurance. The last financial year was finished.
Chris is closer to this than me.
Well, no, the submission date for that, for our Charities Commission one, is the 31st of December. Yeah.
So by which time? No, by which time, let's hope it's not an academic question. But, yeah.
When you talk to the council, they don't deny how good service provide. They always got, there are the rules and requirements. And one other I've come across is if it's supporting them financially, it just doesn't work. So what is the reason behind the difference?
As I say, I talked before about that. I think the reason why there's been a poor relationship is because of these misunderstandings, and I really do genuinely feel that if we can keep the dialogue going a little bit longer, that's the purpose of this pack. You're right. It is. Someone just said it's hugely detailed. That's entirely down to Chris's efforts. He's put together this pack for us. I believe if people look at that carefully, consider all the arguments in there, they will see that there is a credible plan. The one thing I didn't mention is the consultant, the mayor, only because I forgot. The mayor stood up and said, we've given them a consultant to help them to put that business plan together. That's very important. The consultant is an ex-employee of the council at a very senior level, who's retired from the council now, works for his own business. And he's been employed to come and look at very closely at our organisation and our finances. He sits with Chris Willets for 2 days a week in his office. But my point to the mayor, and you'll see it in the pack there, is somebody has told the mayor false information. The mayor said, we've given them a consultant to help do it. The consultant had his first meeting with Chris Willets on May the 23rd. On May the 23rd in the evening, trustees met to make the final decision about whether they could write a business plan or not. The next morning at 10:30, we were sitting in the mayor's office telling him why reluctantly we couldn't produce the business plan. The consultant, would have had about 2 hours, to have done all of that work. And I think someone's just told the mayor false information. I've told the mayor, I've said, look, I've written to you, and Tarek, who's one of our trustees, had separately written to the mayor saying, we both said independently the same thing. We said, no, but that's a great idea. Will you give us that consultant? Will you tell that consultant to please work with the trustees and Chris and see whether we can put together if this man can't come up with the answer to that, because he worked in finance in the council in a very senior role, and now he knows everything there is to know pretty much about, well, he doesn't know as much as Chris, obviously. Nobody knows as much as Chris, no. I certainly don't. But this guy does. So we've asked the mayor, will you please now ask that consultant, from what you know, from what you've seen, and from your experience, is there or is there not a credible business plan? The mayor has promised that he will ask that question of the consultant. So I'm keeping not just my fingers crossed, but everything crossed. We ought to have I done everybody?
So we got gentleman at the back there, gentleman at the front there, and I'll take the last one there as the lady at the back there. Okay. And actually, I've just realised, Chris, I think the question of in the past, has the Tower Hamlets Council contributed towards the finances? That was your question, wasn't it? So that hasn't been answered. If we just quickly answer that, and then we'll go on to those.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. I wrote it down. Again, very clearly, the council has committed to two things. One, as I said to you, they've said to Langdon Park School, don't worry about the deficit. It's not your fault, it's not your problem. This is a borough-wide organisation. So they're underwriting that deficit when it's been agreed, whatever the sum is. It's a huge sum of money we're talking about. You know, it's somewhere in the region of about 140,000 to 150,000 pounds, and it's that ballpark. You know, so just so that you know, we're not talking millions here. But they've underwritten that, and they've also underwritten the redundancies, and they always have. From the very first inception in 2011, the borough made it clear Langdon Park School will continue to employ all the staff, but if and when we needed to make staff redundant, and we've done that once before, during the Olympic year, we had to make staff redundant. The council underwrote the redundancy, so they've honoured that. So that's the funding that we've had. Now, the other funding that we've had is through the mainstream grants, but that isn't anything to do with this. Anybody in the borough can apply for money through mainstream grant. You put in a bid, goes to a scrutiny committee, and if you pass the test, you get the money, and if you don't, so we've done that. We've bid for money from the borough.
Thank you. Okay, gentleman at the back there.
Hi, my name's Richard. I'm a parent as well, and service user to my kids. I don't know if my question makes entire sense, but if I was sitting on the council, I probably would be a little bit nervous and a little bit confused, and perhaps getting a mis-idea if I'm going to be paying a lot of people over. You're quite right in saying, yes, technically they are paid to the council anyway because they're via Langdon Park, but it's probably going to have money, if it's going to be paid over, it's going to come from a different pot of money in the budget. You're asking the council to put in some money from the sports budget that they have. I was just wondering, is the Tower Hamlets budget, is it costed enough to look at it very closely so that you can actually go to the council and say, well, here's this money, here's this money, here's this money. Could we look at using this money in this way? Could money be used here? I just kind of being proactive and looking at their budget and coming to them with solutions and saying, well, could it work like that? Is anything like that being done, and can it be done?
Thank you. And then if we come across this gentleman here.
Hi, Chris. My name's Reg Huck. I'm also a member of the Tower Hamlets Labour Party, and I live in the borough, and I also run a hockey club, Tower Hamlets Hockey Club, in the borough as well. I've got a couple of points just to kind of make with regards to this meeting. Sorry, I'm a bit used to using these things, so it's a bit worrying that we don't have a single Labour councillor attendance tonight, especially considering this ward, the Weavers ward, has 2 Labour councillors, one of which is the councillor for who's in charge of sports and youth, and the other one who's the mayoral advisor for antisocial behaviour. Something that we've obviously seen is a problem at the moment. And it's even more concerning that the mayor has also failed to show up today as well. The mayor publicly has made some statements with regards to the foundation, which, based on some of the things that you've said, are completely inaccurate. One of those things he also said was the fact that the foundation do not provide a value for money to schools. He's also said that the foundation has lost confidence in schools. And finally, he's also said that the council have been meeting any deficits that you guys have incurred over the past few years. So these are comments directly from the mayor's mouth. And my question to you is, what are the answers to that specifically? And also, thoughts with regards to the non-attendance of any members of the Labour councillors?
The lady at the back there, final question, please.
Well, I only came across your youth argument when I was at council the other week, and it's very nice to see what you've done in the borough. I used to teach at Bishop Challoner, and I'm not a PE teacher, but I remember they were really enthusiastic with all the children to get them into sport, and it's all great, isn't it? You know, I'm really glad. But my question is, from what I understand, from only listening to your argument for the last few days and reading a little bit about you on the internet, is it a question about financial and a business plan? This is what I'm seeming to not understand. So the idea of your charity is good. You're going into school and making children happy, which is good. There's lots of parents that are supporting you, which is good. But then there's a reason why the council and the mayor, I'm not a Labour Party supporter or in that party, I'm just a person, Natasha. And what I don't understand is, the argument you're giving to us tonight, for me just listening to everything you've said, is that the mayor is not understanding your business plan because he's interpreted it incorrectly and he's not seeing how magnificent it could be if he used it and emboldened it and infused it to all of Tower Hamlets. Is this your argument, more or less?
Thank you.
Yeah. What was my first one? I've written down how to put a budget together. What was no, remind me. Sorry, the brain is packed up. What was the point?
My question was just whether the Tower Hamlets budget is detailed enough that you guys have to look at it.
Got it. No, I've got it. Yeah, it's come back. Sorry. No, but it could be really quite quickly. It goes back to the point I've made a number of times tonight, because because of all these myths that we've had to wade through to get to this point, we haven't just been able to sit down round that table. Hopefully now, as I say, we could do it with the consultant whose sole job it is to understand the finances, and to put out a hit mark and say, if you do this, this and this, and we do that and those, then we've got a plan. And I believe it could be done relatively quickly, but with the proviso that we said before, that one of the factors in this is that you're dependent on schools committing, a sizable number of schools committing their own resources to this. But effectively, we haven't got any way around that. I mean, ultimately, if the schools in Tower Hamlets don't think we're doing a good job and don't want to buy our services, well, we're done anyway. We've got to pack up and go, because they are the lifeblood. They're the people we've got to satisfy. If we don't satisfy them, it's time to go.
So just I want to make an observation here. So in other cases, you see, so all these detailed stuff, I think, very hard for any one of us to understand. What we are talking about here, that a number of schools in the borough, and they also buy your service, that you want council to lead, rescue you, the deficit that you have right now. Is that what you are saying?
No. As I say, and it the last questioner there, I think you came in late. Am I right? To the meeting? No, I mean tonight. I mean you came in late. All right. Oh, no, sorry, I wasn't being rude. Sorry, no, I wasn't being rude. I wondered if you'd been here when I was talking about the business plan. Yeah. I'm not sure that he doesn't understand. As I said before, I can't ask him. If only he'd been here tonight, I wouldn't have to speculate. My view is that a hard-working mayor, which it's a big job being mayor of a borough, like this. I suspect a hard-working mayor depends upon the right people giving him the right information at any one time. I suspect the right people have not given him accurate information for him to make some of those statements. So our job now is to try and make it abundantly clear to everybody, which is why we've done it publicly now. I mean, now nobody will be able to say again, I hope in public, oh, but your trustees didn't produce a business plan. Because lots and lots of people will know, including every single councillor, yes, they did, here it is. It's not the one you wanted, but they did do it. So I believe we can jump over that hurdle now.
I still have a doubt here, that the service we are providing is working in very young people, and it's very productive, very popular, and it's going on for a number of years.
No, no, no.
So now let me finish. Whether you are in trouble or not, the borough has a responsibility. If they recognize that this office is worthwhile, productive for our young people, then the mayor and his team, the borough as a whole, have a responsibility to rescue the organization. So I'm finding, all this stuff about deficit and surplus and...
No, but sorry, I wasn't being rude, but it's really important. We are absolutely not asking for a rescue bid.
So what
It's very, very simple. We're simply saying an awful lot of what we do is not something which individual schools should be paying for. We're providing borough services. And we're saying, for instance, just one example, every year we won the status, we're the most improved borough out of 33 London boroughs this year in the London Youth Games. They gave us that award. We've moved from 25th place to 9th place. But we're saying every other London borough, the borough pays, the council pays for that. And in Tower Hamlets, the schools have been paying for it. We're simply saying we want you to pay for things which we're doing, which are borough functions. Yeah, but it's not a rescue. It's not a rescue bid.
Sorry, just for the purpose, everybody's raised their hand. I did give you an opportunity without raising your hand. So, no, and I think if you're having trouble understanding it, I'm sure either Chris can spare you some time afterwards, because I think the majority here have understood it. So thank you.
And I've written down value for money and deficits. What on earth did that mean? What was the question? Remind me.
The mayor said that you're not providing a value for money service to schools.
Yeah.
The council have covered the deficit for a number of years.
Yeah.
And also the schools have lost confidence
Yeah.
in the service.
Well, as I said, at the start, I mean, the whole first section is about the number of schools that subscribe to our service. I think, again, people plainly didn't understand. People, saw the number of schools that had already paid their money in this financial year and thought that was the sole number that we were working with. We've had correspondence with officers who've said, why are you suggesting we should go looking for money from this, and this school? They don't ever buy your services. And we've said, yes, they do. We're working in there now, of course, but there have just been misunderstandings about it. I think the correct information has not gone through. I make the point again. I mean, I don't believe we would have the level of support that we have had with this campaign if it was just us saying that we were doing a good job and it wasn't the case that, the vast majority of people out there also thought we were doing it. But let me hasten to say, I was talking to Chris about this yesterday. We were having a chat up at Blackheath Cricket Club. I am the last person in the world ever to stand up and say, we're brilliant, we get everything right, we've never done anything wrong, we couldn't improve, leave us alone. I mean, for goodness sake, we know that. We can always improve, and we know that just like any other organisation, sometimes our service dips in a particular area, sometimes a school will pull out next year because they've had a bad experience of a particular coach or whatever this year, and Chris goes in, talks to the head teacher, promises to sort it out, does his level best to do that, normally succeeds. Do you know what I mean? We're a living, breathing human organisation. We make mistakes, and we know that we've got to continue giving value for money to our customers. They're not going to join us just because we've got Tower Hamlets written on the front of our folders. We've got to sell ourselves, and we've got to provide a quality service to them, and we think we do. Oh, sorry, the non-attendance. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I rang both the councillors for this ward today when I knew the mayor wasn't coming, to say to them, look, the mayor's not coming. Is there any chance that you can go? I only managed to get through to Councillor Pearce, but he'd already got other commitments. Which does happen. I mean, this was called at very short notice. This meeting, obviously, following the council meeting. But yeah, it would have been good to have had more. But sorry, Lee's one of our trustees. I'm sorry, Chair. Do you mind? Yeah. You've got a pretty good voice, actually.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Lee Phillips, and I've been a trustee for this foundation for about the last year and a half. Just one sort of comment I want to make in the allotted time. Chris has done a great job, I think, representing all of the trustees. It's not just him. As he explained before, trustees are made up of primary school head teachers, secondary school head teachers, members of our local community, and plus a number of members, including myself, of the sort of financial community. I'm a managing director of one of the sort of financial firms. We have a very, very sort of clear long-term strategy, a viable strategy for the long-term and future of this foundation. But we need help in this transitional stage. We need help to extract us from the school. And we need help to allow us to continue to provide this community funding. Once we have an established future, we can then become that fully fledged, independent foundation in which provides the existing services and more. This foundation is extremely attractive to the large institutions in which are very, very close by, in the City of London over there and Canary Wharf over there. However, we cannot get funding at this point in our life because the future is so uncertain. We need this stable foundation. We need a few years transition, and our trustees are very, very confident that we can fund ourselves independently from the council. But we would like to work with them to really, really help and join forces on this community work. And we think it's in the best interest of the council, and we think it's in the best interest of the local people. And we think that's enough for us to really, really sort of commit to this foundation on a long-term basis.
Thank you. And I don't know if you wish to add to that, because I just want to take one more question. We'll take this one final question, and I'm going to close because we've done over 90 minutes without a half-time oranges break.
Yeah, I'd like to say I came through the foundation when I was in year 7. I was in school, and that's when I got picked up to go and play for the district. And after that, I was allowed to play for the youth team in London School. And I think knowing our borough is so poor and our parents always working, they can't take us to places like London School or Kent, which is 6-7 miles away. Sometimes you have to go so when we were at the foundation, I don't know, none of us, there's a lot of people that plays council and London School. I think with that foundation, I don't think we would have managed to go that far. We probably would have played in district level, and that's it. And Blackheath was another one. I used to play for school. We used to finish school competition, and then we used to go to play final in middle of camp. And without racing half, and I don't think none of us would. And I mean, by finishing school after 16, I don't know what to go to college, but because of the foundation, I managed to go work with them. I did go coaching, and now I just got a degree in sports science in teaching and coaching, and I like to go into do that. But I'm saying, if the council is not helping this foundation, what's the future of the foundation? What's the future of the young people like me that are coming through? I mean, what's going to happen to them? If they don't play this sport, part of my degree, I did a research study on Bengali girls in Hamlets. I went to a few schools, and I found that only 24%, Bengalis that take part in sport, female. And when I did my study in school, I did focus group, and they were saying that, they want more competition, they want more sports coaching. I mean, they like to do boxing. Some of the schools, secondary schools especially, I did with year 10, and what they said is that they don't get enough choice in sport, and due to that, they don't know what to do, and that's why they stay at home or television or just go out. I mean, if the foundation really brings so much to competition, if there's none, then what's going to happen to those, especially those females? Now they're going to do any sport, or they're going to get sitting at home. And also, obviously, the government are looking into obesity and all that stuff. Without what's going to is the council be able to carry on what the foundation is doing? Will they be able to take people to their games and bet?
I'll get, that's a very good testament. I'll get Chris to actually add to that testament and look at the future. And obviously, I'll get Chris to really sum up from that. So thank you.
You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to sum up. I only thought it'd be a good idea if John was here as well for us both to be able to sum up. I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody. And I'm quite sincerely, I can't actually remember too many meetings like this in my life that have been so comprehensive. I mean, look at the range of people who are here tonight and the contributions that we've had, I mean, absolutely fantastic. When we go to the scrutiny committee, you're coming with us, because, they need to hear, councillors need to hear, people like you talking as passionately as you just have. Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing what I asked you to do at the very beginning, I think, you know, nobody could accuse anybody here tonight of using this, you know, to personalise matters or to, you know, play party politics. I think everybody has made contributions here in the spirit that I asked you to at the start, you know, focusing on equal opportunities for young people. So thank you for giving up 2 hours of your Sunday to do that. Thank you all for coming. The petition's still running online, it is, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I guess it's closed from here. I'm sure all of you wish the best of luck in this consultation process.